What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to do some in-depth technical analysis and give you guys my price prediction for tomorrow based off what the chart is showing and based off what the data is suggesting. I'm also going to talk about Tesla's earnings report, when that's coming out, why that's going to be very big, and also the different factors from earnings to the GDP reports to the Fed meeting that could really affect the market for the next 2 weeks, from Tesla to many different stocks out there and ETFs and so on and so forth. Now, before I do any predictions, before I say anything about Tesla, I do have to mention a couple of things real quick. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Don't take any of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, whether it's $1 or $100, it's up to you. You're guaranteed 6 free stocks, each worth up to $3,500. And the best part is you could always sell those 6 free stocks for cash and use that cash to buy some Tesla shares. It's a limited time offer. It ends in just 6 days. So please check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So looking at Tesla, this thing is currently up about 0.74% for the day. And one of the things that's very clear to see right off the bat is Tesla respecting this pennant right over here. And we have a tendency of respecting it. We did actually kind of see a bit of a breakout right here, followed by a rejection leading us down right here. Then we got a nice bounce right here as well, just continuing on this trend. Now, what does this mean for the future going forward? Well, one of the things to note is the fact that I do anticipate many of these bull traps to kind of continue as the market becomes kind of choppy. And I do see a lot of choppy price action coming. So I want to warn you about that. Now, why do I think Tesla in particular is going to see lots of choppy price action? That's because of this earnings report that's coming out. So I don't know if the date is actually shown here, but on the 20th, I believe on Wednesday, right after the market closes, Tesla is going to have their earnings report for the second quarter. And a lot of people, some people are just kind of excited. Most people are very apprehensive. And that's because we saw a bit of a drop in their overall deliveries. Now, when the deliveries came out, Tesla actually did pretty well. They actually showed that they beat some expectations that were lowered, but they actually did not meet expectations, the original expectations that not Walmart, Wall Street had. And the funny thing about this is even though, in my opinion, Tesla did well in a way because they actually held up their deliveries. They delivered over 258,000 vehicles despite the supply chain issues and the factory shutdowns. But overall, it's down compared to the previous quarter, right? Relative to the previous quarter, we have a market that tends to compare data that way. And because the data is technically down, because there were supply chain constraints, and Elon Musk would tweet things such as the factories losing Tesla billions of dollars, with all those things going on, it's very probable that one of the things that happens during a recession is we see a drop in EPS, a drop in profits for a lot of companies, especially because inflation was still at a very high state during this quarter. So what this means is that Tesla may report their earnings showing a drop in revenue compared to before. They could meet expectations on revenue, but I'm a little bit concerned about their earnings per share. And if they show a drop in their earnings per share, typically the stock would drop if things like that were to happen. So what I think is happening is a lot of investors know this. They realize that Tesla did see a drop in the second quarter earnings. So it's very possible we kind of drop in share price as we get very close to the date of earnings, which is going to be on July 20th. Now, other big things to kind of keep in your calendars and your minds are the fact that on the 28th of July, we have the second quarter GDP report coming out. It will likely be negative according to many reports from different sources, but we don't truly know yet. And one of the dictionary definitions of a recession would be 2 consecutive negative GDP quarters. So we got the first negative quarter already. If the second one is negative, that could be a negative catalyst for the markets. Markets could respond negatively to this. In addition to that, I want to talk about this right here. On July 26th through the 27th, we have the Fed meetings. The big date would be the 27th, and Jerome Powell and the Fed are going to announce more monetary changes. So as a result of this, we may see either a 75 or a 100 basis point rate hike. It's kind of 50-50 at this point, but a lot of investors are kind of pricing in and getting prepared for that 100 basis point rate hike. So as we get closer to this date, it's not that far away. that's going to be big for the markets. We may actually see a bit of a drop, in my personal opinion. So, what does this mean for Tesla and the markets going forward? Well, looking at SPY, it is possible for SPY to kind of push a little bit up, but you could see right here, we have this key resistance level. Now, we have this gap right here, which is actually an indication SPY could push up a bit. But after that, we've been constantly getting rejected off 390. And if the SPY could actually break that, I mean, I would be a little surprised if we could break past the 390 range. I find that a little bit unlikely. And we also have this gap down here as well that would take the SPY down to 378. So I do think it's very possible we get a push to the upside for maybe a day or so. And this could actually be positive for Tesla, followed by more downside for the markets as earnings come out. And with all the earnings reports coming out, I'm very, positive that the data won't be that great after everything that happened in the second quarter. And I know I don't really like to say that, but it is the uncomfortable truth. Choppy price action is most likely going to come, in my opinion. Now, the most bullish possibility would be the SPY actually going as high as 401, filling the gap up here. It's possible. It is unlikely, in my opinion, to happen that quickly. It is still possible, but it's just very unlikely. It seems like the markets are set to see some upside, maybe a tiny bit of upside, followed by more downside, unless earnings are super good, and they most likely won't be that good. In the grand scheme of things, I mentioned this in a previous video. I'll just show you this real quick for SPY. SPY has been respecting a downtrend. We haven't shown the signs of the breakout just yet. We're not showing a trend reversal, and it does look like there could be more potential downside, especially for these weeks coming up. I mentioned that in previous videos with earnings, and not to mention the FOMC meeting. It just seems very, very likely for that to be the case. For Tesla, what do I see this thing doing? Well, I mentioned that this thing was respecting this pennant, and if I actually zoom out a little bit and just to show you a more meticulous chart, you'll notice this right here. We have a tendency of kind of bouncing between these lines. Sometimes we kind of break out of it a little bit, but overall, it does look more like we're going to respect this. And if we were to respect this, it looks to me like Tesla's set to maybe push up a little bit more. It could push as high as the 730 range. And if that's the case, a nice push during opening, I do anticipate more downside to actually come, maybe even for tomorrow. We might see Tesla slowly start to descend and approach this 680 level as we get closer to earnings. Now, in my opinion, that's just a possibility because sometimes the market does do things you don't expect. So be prepared for anything, which is why I'm going to go over the more bullish and bearish possibilities before giving you my prediction. And I want to put it out there that you got to be prepared for anything. You got to, watch the charts carefully, and you have to be very careful with this market. Sometimes unpredictable things could happen. Now, from a technical standpoint, let me just show you another, very big thing to look at, and that is you can see right here we get these crossovers from the MACD and the signal line. Nice pushes ups like that. We got a crossover down as Tesla was descending. We got a nice crossover up, which shows some space for maybe a little bit room for maybe a push up, followed by more potential downside, in my opinion, as we're getting tighter. And on top of that, as we're getting tighter, we're probably going to see traps. So market makers like to trick retail, the same old manipulation. I am still anticipating that, and I want you to be prepared for potential downside. I do see that being a little bit more likely. Now, on the daily time frame, let's see what I haven't actually looked at these for a while. What you'll notice that's good about Tesla is the fact that this thing is getting tighter. It could drop a little bit, but in the future, it does look like we're slowly getting a little bit closer to a potential crossover from the 1348 EMA. So midterm, maybe within the next like 4 weeks, it is possible for Tesla to start pushing right back up to the high 700s. And until then, I mean, as of right now, it does look like we're still going to respect this pennant until then. So still looking the same. We're not seeing any 1348 EMA crossovers yet on the daily. So I know people asked about that, so I'm just calling that out. RSI is picking up a bit for Tesla, which is pretty good. But once again, there are traps all the time, and it is ascending with the trend. So we're not seeing like bullish or bearish divergence just yet. But overall, it just looks like it's going to kind of respect what we're already seeing. So let me actually close this now, draw out what I think is the most likely possibility for Tesla. Let me pull up the 5-minute candles, and then let me zoom out a little bit and just make this a little bit easier to understand. So for Tesla, I anticipate a lot of traps coming. All right. I think it's very possible for this thing to push up into open, maybe hit 730, maybe even touch 740. It's possible. But once we get a nice push up, I expect potential downside for the remainder of the day. It might start to push down like this, and it might slowly come back to the levels it was previously at. And it's possible we actually start dropping a little lower and start to test 700 again. And if 700 doesn't hold us, I'm anticipating it, holding us. If it doesn't hold us, we could get a bounce off of it and kind of push up, just trade sideways from here, and maybe see a slightly red day. Maybe not super red, but a little bit red. I think that's very possible and a little bit more likely than us seeing more and more green. And I think that because earnings is coming up and the markets are kind of capricious right now. Now, could we get a big, push up and a potential green close? I do think that's also possible. If Tesla does push up and actually, manages to stay green, I don't want you to get too excited. That's my honest opinion. I think that it would be good to see Tesla turn green, just for a day or two, if that's the case for Monday. But downside a little bit later during the week is still imminent, in my opinion, especially as earnings is coming. I think markets are going to be kind of capricious and apprehensive, and earnings may not be the best. I mean, just based off the data alone, based off what we're seeing from here, the drop in deliveries, a potential drop in earnings per share with supply chain constraints, I'm not, getting my hopes up too high. The only really big thing that could push the share price up hard on or after earnings would be them potentially announcing the stock split, the exact date of it, and other details like that. That could be good. But besides that, I mean, it's just not looking that great from a more fundamental standpoint, because stock splits, yeah, they could be good. They could open more doors, but they aren't the biggest things from a fundamental basis. Now, with that out of the way, the last thing I wanted to talk about is what support and resistance levels should you be prepared for. So if Tesla does push up, okay, because I'm not always going to be right with these predictions. I do these because lots of viewers have requested them. If I could be wrong, right? Sometimes predictions don't always go as you anticipate. I do think downside is very possible. But if Tesla pushes up, okay, to about 730, that's very possible. If we could break 730, then 740 would be the next key zone between this range here. And if it's super bullish, if the market somehow just explodes out of nowhere, I would anticipate the possibility of a trap. Tesla could go as high as 750. Very unlikely, but I'm not one to say it's impossible. And if we start dropping, all of these become support zones as well. If you see Tesla dropping, 715 is something that held us up for some time. Look at this activity right here. We were actually holding 715 for the majority of Friday. If we drop below 715, we're going to start testing most likely 700, the 700 to 715 range, kind of bouncing like this. And we've been holding 700 for a good amount of time, but there was a moment where we dropped a little below it and kind of bounced off like 688, 685. Well, the next like really major level, if we do break below 700 somehow, if that happens, it's going to be the 680 range. Very important zone. I mean, sometimes it's like $5 on top of that. So I just want you all to be prepared for this, be prepared for anything in the markets. But from a technical standpoint, it's looking like, yeah, we could get a slight push up, maybe a little bit out of this wedge, and then we start kind of dropping after that. And that is kind of like what this trend is showing. And we should actually get a bounce a little bit higher than this right here, a little bit higher than 675, hopefully maybe around 680, maybe a little bit higher. So that's essentially what I'm seeing in the charts right now. I am anticipating some downside. I do believe there are going to be lots of traps. I know the markets don't like to hear this, but at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. Because remember, the long term future is still very, very bright. You just have to be patient. This whole bear market, it's not over yet. We're still seeing signs of it perpetuating, but it will end eventually. And I believe one of the biggest catalysts will be quantitative easing from the Fed being less hawkish and kind of shifting on more of the dovish side, and us seeing inflation go down like in an actual, realistic way. That's going to be another catalyst for the market to start kind of shifting its course and actually becoming less choppy and building more confidence for a lot of these investors. With that said and done, implied volatility is going to go up, meaning the premiums for options are going to go higher for Tesla and lots of different companies because we have earnings coming out. So you have opportunities to potentially sell some covered calls or sell puts if you want. That's really up to you to decide. I'm not necessarily giving financial advice. So that's essentially what I have for this video. Thank you all for listening. Please have a great rest of the day. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla to the moon, and peace out.